A glass bottle explodes across a man's face. The music doesn't stop. The room doesn't empty. Nobody calls the police. The Bamboo Lounge, Canarsie, Brooklyn, late 1970s. A restaurant owner asks Tommy DeSimone to pay his tab. $7,000. Not a request. A plea. Tommy laughs. Then he smashes the bottle. Blood on the floor. Chairs scrape. The owner backs away. It looks like chaos. It looks like a reckless gangster, out of control. That's the version everyone remembers. But here's the part almost nobody notices. The moment that bottle shattered, the Bamboo Lounge stopped being a restaurant. It became leverage. The owner, shaken and desperate, did what men in that neighborhood always did when they had no options left. He went to Paul Vario. Paulie sighed, called Tommy a lowlife, said he was impossible. What could he do? It sounded like frustration. It wasn't. That was the first step, because Paul Vario did not react to chaos. He converted it. And within months, the Bamboo Lounge would be hollowed out from the inside, loans taken, credit drained, inventory sold out the back door until nothing remained but debt. Tommy looked like the problem. He wasn't. He was the pressure. And Paul Vario was already calculating the extraction. February 9th, 1984. A federal courthouse in Brooklyn, New York. Paul Vario, 69 years old, sat in the defendant's chair and listened. The verdict came back in minutes. Guilty. 4 years in federal prison. A $10,000 fine. He was going to prison not because the FBI had outsmarted him, but because the man in the witness box was Henry Hill, the kid he had taken off the streets of Brooklyn 30 years earlier, the one person he thought he could trust. He didn't flinch, just looked straight ahead, as if none of it was his problem. Paul Vario was not built for the spotlight. That was policy. In a world full of men who couldn't stop talking, he built an empire on silence, patience, and the ability to convert other people's problems into profit. As a capo regime in the Lucchese crime family, he ran loan sharking, hijackings, bookmaking, and airport extortion rackets, generating millions every year across Brooklyn and Long Island. The FBI had files an inch thick by the mid-1970s. They could trace his money. They could place him at meetings. They just couldn't find a witness willing to say it. For 2 decades, that protected him. This is the story of how Vario built that machinery, how he used a volatile killer named Tommy DeSimone as an unwitting instrument of extraction, how a $7,000 bar tab at a restaurant in Canarsie became one of the most precise financial predations in mob history, and how the one thing he never controlled became the thing that destroyed him. But here is what most people miss. Vario didn't just run a crew, he ran a system. The Bamboo Lounge was not a problem he couldn't solve. It was a problem he chose not to solve, because he had already identified the opportunity inside it. Paul Vario was born on July 10, 1914, in Brooklyn. At 11 years old, he was sentenced to 7 months in juvenile detention. That stretch didn't frighten him. It educated him. By his early 20s, he had moved into serious crime. In 1937, at age 23, he was convicted of rape and sentenced to 10 to 20 years at Sing Sing in Ossining, New York. Paroled twice. Sent back twice for violations. His record established early what the mob would confirm. Vario didn't bend. He endured. He kept score. By the time he was formally made in the Lucchese crime family in 1962, he was nearly 50. He ran operations out of a junkyard in Canarsie, Brooklyn. On paper, a salvage business. In practice, a command center. Hijackings coordinated there, stolen goods processed there, bookmaking through the back office, loan collections by men who carried more than clipboards. Clients who missed deadlines didn't get late notices. They got visits. Here is what separated Vario from every other capo in Brooklyn. He didn't want to be feared. He wanted to be invisible. The feared got noticed. The noticed got indicted. Vario positioned himself at the intersection of every transaction while keeping his name off every document. The money flowed toward him, the exposure flowed away. Thomas DeSimone was born in 1950 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but grew up in New York, surrounded by organized crime from birth. His uncle and grandfather were established mob figures. By 15, he was inside Vario's crew, fearless, explosive, indifferent to consequences. At 17, Tommy committed his first murder, not for money, not for logic, but simply to prove he could. Word moved fast. It established what Tommy was, a weapon you could aim at a problem. Through Vario, Tommy met Henry Hill, born June 11, 1943, in Brownsville, Brooklyn. Hill proved useful in ways Tommy never managed. Where Tommy created chaos, Henry contained it. Where Tommy left messes, Henry cleaned them up. Vario used both deliberately, but he trusted only himself. Now, pay close attention, because what happened at the Bamboo Lounge is not just a mob story. It is a blueprint that still runs today. The Bamboo Lounge was a restaurant and bar in Canarsie, Brooklyn, owned by Angelo McConaughey, known as Sonny Bamboo. The crew used it daily: drinks, food, the ordinary texture of street life. Because Tommy DeSimone treated it as his personal property, the bills accumulated. By the time Sonny reached his limit, the tab Tommy owed was $7,000. $7,000 Tommy had no intention of settling. Sonny went to Paulie. He explained the situation respectfully. He expected one of two outcomes. Either Vario would order Tommy to pay, or Vario would cover the debt himself. What he did not expect was what actually happened. Vario sighed. He shook his head. He called Tommy a lowlife. He said, what could he do? The guy was impossible. He sent Sonny home with nothing. Most people hear that and think Vario was frustrated, caught between a reckless associate and an angry owner. That reading is wrong. What Paulie Vario saw when he looked at Sonny Bamboo was not a problem. It was a transaction. Within weeks, Vario had acquired a stake in the Bamboo Lounge, and that was when the real operation started. This is how a bust-out works. The FBI spent years explaining it to juries who couldn't believe people actually operated this way. They did. They still do. First, you acquire a stake in a struggling business by positioning yourself as the solution to a debt the owner cannot collect. You are a partner now. The owner is relieved. Second, you use the business's established credit history to take out loans and open accounts with every supplier you can reach. The paperwork looks clean because the business is legitimate. Credit extends automatically. Third, you order merchandise far beyond what the business can move. Premium liquor, expensive food, bulk inventory the place would never sell in months of normal operation. The suppliers fill the orders because the account has always been good. Fourth, the merchandise goes out the back door the same week it comes in the front, sold for cash at a discount. The crew divides the money. The invoices stay unpaid. Fifth, credit collapses. Payments stop. Suppliers hold worthless receivables. Lenders hold notes secured against a business that has been hollowed from the inside. Sixth, the business closes. By bankruptcy, by fire, by abandonment. The outcome is always the same. Every dollar of extractable value is already gone. At the Bamboo Lounge, this ran for months. Vario's crew ordered generously on the restaurant's credit. Everything convertible to cash was converted. Sonny watched his business die and never fully understood what had happened. Tommy thought he was untouchable muscle. Sonny thought Paulie would save him. Neither one saw the reality. Tommy was the lever. Sonny was the door. Vario was the man who had already mapped every room inside. But the Bamboo Lounge was not the peak. It was the smallest illustration of a method Vario ran at a much larger scale. By the late 1970s, his crew had spent years inside the cargo operations at John F. Kennedy International Airport, extorting shippers and airlines for labor peace, hijacking trucks worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Millions moved through this structure every year. And then came December 11, 1978. A crew under Associate Jimmy Burke walked into the Lufthansa Airlines cargo vault at JFK and took $5,800,000 in cash and $875,000 in jewelry, the largest cash robbery in American history at that time. Vario approved the operation. His cut came off the top. He was not in the building. He never was. The aftermath unraveled everything. Burke began eliminating the participants one by one to avoid splitting the money and to silence witnesses. Bodies appeared across Queens and Brooklyn through early 1979. The FBI moved in. Tommy DeSimone did not survive. January of 1979, he disappeared at 28 years old and has never been found. Declared legally dead in 1990. The accounts vary on exact details, but what is documented is this. Vario revealed to the Gambino family that Tommy had murdered William Benfina, known as Billy Bats, a made Gambino soldier, without authorization. Under the code of Cosa Nostra, that meant death. Vario had shielded Tommy for years. Then Tommy became more liability than asset, and the protection ended. No confrontation. He simply withdrew and let the consequences arrive. It was the coldest confirmation of everything the Bamboo Lounge had shown. For Vario, people were instruments. When an instrument stopped producing value, the arrangement ended. Henry Hill was arrested in May of 1980 on narcotics charges, facing a sentence long enough to consume the rest of his life. He took the deal. He entered federal witness protection and began talking. His testimony produced more than 50 federal convictions. On February 9, 1984, Vario was found guilty of defrauding the federal government. 4 years and a $10,000 fine. In October 1985, extorting freight companies at JFK Airport added 10 more years. On May 3, 1988, Paul Vario died at Fort Worth Federal Prison in Fort Worth, Texas. Respiratory failure from lung cancer. He was 73 years old. Buried at St. John's Cemetery in Middle Village, Queens. He never cooperated. He never testified against anyone. He went to prison and stayed there until there was nothing left. Henry Hill died on June 12, 2012. Jimmy Burke died in federal prison on April 13, 1996. Tommy DeSimone has never been found. The Bamboo Lounge is gone. The junkyard is gone. The crew dissolved through the 1980s under RICO prosecutions and the weight of men who talked. But the method never disappeared. Bust-out fraud is a documented epidemic in financial crime right now. The mechanics are identical. Establish credit, extract value, leave the shell, exit before the collapse. Vario ran it with such patience and precision it looked, from the outside, like nothing at all. The chaos was always visible, the extraction never was. Power, in Vario's world, was not the noise you made. It was the silence you kept, while the people around you created chaos you converted into money. Tommy DeSimone raged and killed and thought that made him untouchable. Paul Vario watched, calculated, and profited from every single moment of it. The loudest man in the room was dangerous. The quietest one was lethal. If this story gave you something to think about, subscribe now. We release a new mob documentary every week. Drop a comment below. Was Henry Hill a rat who destroyed his crew, or was he the only one who finally understood how the game ended?